I'm Phoenix, and you're watching The Bird's Eye View. So, a controversial topic right now is critical race theory and whether it should be taught in schools. So, that's what I would like to talk about. What is critical race theory, though? Well, to make sure I got it right, what I'm telling you, I found an article from CNN. It says, critical race theory recognizes that systemic racism is a part of American society and it challenges the beliefs that allow it to flourish. Now, Kimberly Crenshaw, I think I'm pronouncing that right, is a founding critical race theorist and a law professor who teaches at UCLA and Columbia University. She said this about critical race theory. Critical race theory is a practice. It's an approach to grappling with the history of white supremacy that rejects the belief that what's in the past is in the past and that the laws and systems that grow from the past are detached from it. The article goes on to say, critical race theorists believe that racism is an everyday experience for most people of color and that a large part of society has no interest in doing away with it because it benefits white elites. Many also believe that American institutions are racist and that people are privileged or oppressed because of their race. Well, the theory was started as a way to examine how laws and systems promote inequality. It has since expanded. It says, critical race theory attends not only to law's transformative role, which is often celebrated, but is also to its role in establishing the very rights and privileges that legal reform was set to dismantle. Crenshaw told CNN. So that's, according to CNN article, is what critical race theory is. So to wrap it up, it's basically saying that the American systems, whether it's the justice system, the government, or corporate systems, benefit the white elites, and that if you're a person of color, you're hurt by systemic racism. So I want to talk about the pros and cons of being taught in school. Now, before I get started on that, I want to acknowledge that I had a little trouble finding the pros of it. Me personally, I don't see a whole lot of benefit in it, but I'll do the best I can to find pros. So here are the pros that I think of critical race theory. I guess you could say it teaches children about slavery and its impact, and Jim Crow and racism and its impact that it has on America today. And I guess that I could see that being something that'd be interesting to learn about. So there's that. And I gotta be honest, that's about all I can think of. And before I get started on the cons, if you have any pros that you can think of to critical race theory that I did not mention, I would love to hear them, because I would love to hear all sides of the story about critical race theory. Now, here are the cons I can think of critical race theory being taught in schools. And that is, one, it's divisive. If you're teaching kids that white people are essentially bad because of systemic racism, and that many don't want the systemic racism to change because it benefits, as the article said, white elites, I think that could be divisive. If, for example, me, as a person of color, if I learn that white people want to put me down because of systemic racism, if I'm in third grade, because schools are wanting to teach in this early on too. If I'm in third grade and I'm like, well, this is what I'm learning, so here's a white kid that I used to be friends with, well, now he must be evil. Doesn't make sense to me. That's why I think it can pin each other against us. It could pin us against each other, and I think that's not good. And I think it can be an excuse for failure. If, for example, like, I'm Hispanic, right? So if I'm taught that, well, because I'm Hispanic, I'm being put down by others, and that's keeping me from success, that's an excuse for not being successful. So if I have an excuse of, well, I'm not successful because of systemic racism, well, of course, it's an excuse, why not? So I think that can be an excuse for failure, and it's not a good idea. I don't think that's a good idea for kids who are growing up learning to be successful. And I think that's one of the other cons. Now, there's a few more cons. There's a few more, but I don't have a ton of time. So let's see. I'll get into more. I have a little outline here for what I was going to talk about. Oh, yes. The backlash. There's been a lot of backlash to critical race theory being taught in schools from parents around America. You're seeing some states, such as Florida, banning critical race theory from being taught in schools. But you're seeing a lot of backlash of the cons, I'm saying, from parents, concerned parents who don't want their children being taught this in school. And I think in a way, it's a developing story, and we're learning more and more about it. There's backlash all across the country, really, and it's going to be a really interesting story to continue to watch. Now, I think critical race theory, over the past couple of years, has been prevalent, but especially after the 2020 George Floyd, I think it became more of a discussion. You had a big Black Lives Matter movement last year, obviously, and I think that it really became more prevalent, especially last year. So I think it's gonna be really interesting to see how that will turn out this year and in the years to come. Is it good? I don't really think so, because as I said with the cons, I think it can divide us. I think it can give us an excuse to fail. And if you're a person of color, I don't think that's good. Or if you're white. I think if you're white and you're being taught that you are benefited because you're white due to systemic racism, I mean, you would think you kind of feel bad about yourself. If you're in first, third, second grade, or first, second, third grade, and even above, I mean, if I'm being taught that because I'm white, I'm benefited and I'm oppressing others, I'm not going to be happy about that. I mean, unless I'm literally racist, which is probably not likely. For most people, we're not going to be racist at all. So, why wouldn't I feel bad? If I'm in school, I'm young, and I don't understand it, I think I would feel bad. It doesn't make sense to me. Or, for Caucasian kids, it can tell you that it can make you feel like you're a bad person, and that could be depressing. Or if you're a person of color, it can also be depressing because you're being taught that, well, because you are a person of color, you won't succeed because the white people are keeping you down. The systemic racism. And I think that's negative. I mean, why would you want to feel that you're oppressed? Not to mention, you can make the excuse of, well, I'm a failure because my color and systemic racism. I could not be successful because of the color of my skin. I don't think that's a good idea. Now, I think that kids should learn about racism in America. And if anything, it could unite us in a way, because we can look at our past, may I specify the past, and say, well, yes, in America, over 100 years ago, we were bad. Even up to less than 100 years ago, we had the Civil Rights Movement in the 60s. And ever since when, we've slowly been getting better and better. And now here we are, 2020. I would say after 2000s, we're a great country. We don't see skin color. But the thing these days is, if you don't see skin color, you're racist. It's confusing to me. I have to be honest. So at first, we're not supposed to see skin color, because if you do, it's racist, right? That's great. You shouldn't, as Martin Luther King said, don't judge somebody by the color of the skin, judge them by their character. Now, that's not verbatim, but basically that's what he said. And now it's, well, if you're white, you're bad, so look at skin color. And it doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't seem like something that could unite us. It seems like something that could divide us. If you want to look at the past, for example, Robert Byrd was an icon of the Democratic Party. He was in the KKK, right? He was racist, but he turned his act around, and that's great. And Democrats still praise him. He was honored by the NAACP. And that's great. But if we're going to continue to look at the past, why isn't he a bad person, right? Or the Democrats were the party of slavery. So it doesn't make sense to me. See, I don't hold it against people. I wouldn't hold it against people now, because this was in the 1960s and even back in the 1800s. But now things have changed. So if we allow that kind of change to be accepted and we look at the present, not the past, why are white people still bad for the past? It doesn't make sense to me, and I think that's going to be really divisive. But I still think kids should learn about racism. I think it's very important to learn about slavery back in the 1800s, though. That's the importance. Teaching about the past and learning, well, I guess not to repeat it. That's one of the greatest things about history. And should we learn? Yes, but we also shouldn't learn that because you're white, you're bad. Because of what your ancestors did, possibly, over 100 years ago. It doesn't seem right to me. I think we should learn to get along, and learn to unite and see not what's different about us, but how we're the same. Whether it's your skin color, your gender, or your political affiliation. I think it's really important that we do that. I'm Phoenix with Phoenix Rising in America, and this is our country.